this session, we will cover what is HTML Web API. So a web, let me tell you what do you mean by API. So API stands for Application Programming Interface. So what is Web API? A Web API is a developer's dream. So number one, it can extend the functionality of the browser. Number two, it can greatly simplify complex functions. Number three, it can provide easy syntax to complex code. So now let us understand what is Web API. So API stands for Application Programming Interface. An API is some kind of interface that includes a set of functions and subroutines that allow programmers to access specific features or data of an application, operating system, or other services. So, a web API is an application programming interface for the web. Now, let us understand what are HTML APIs. So all browsers have a set of built-in web APIs to support complex operations and to help accessing data. So let me give you some main HTML5 APIs. So number one is geolocation API. Number two is drag and drop API. Number three is web storage API. Number four is web workers API. Number five is server sent events API. Then number six is canvas API. So let us understand about each one of them. So first let us see what is geolocation API. So this API is used to access the current location of a user, that is with latitude and longitude. Number two is drag and drop API. So this API enables you to use drag and drop features in browsers. Number three is web storage API. So this API has mechanisms to let browsers store key or value pairs in a more intuitive way than cookies. Then number four is web workers API. So this API allows a JavaScript to run in the background without affecting the performance of the page. So users can continue to do whatever they want, like clicking, selecting things, etc., while the web worker runs in the background. Next, number five is server sent events API. So this API allows a web page to automatically get updates from a server. Then at last you have Canvas API. So this API lets you draw graphics on the fly via JavaScript. So while implementing an HTML API, you should always do three things. Number one is you should check browser capability. Number two is you need to add robust error handling. Number three is you need to request user permission. So let me explain you about each one of them. So what is check browser capability? So always check that the target browser support the API. Always add script or message to be run if a browser doesn't support it. Then number 2 is add robust error handling. So add robust error handling to take care of scenarios whereas an API may not function as expected to ensure a seamless user experience. Number 3 is request user permission. So when using an API that accesses sensitive data like the geolocation API, which will access the user geographical position. So always prompt the user for consent before proceeding. Then after this, let us understand what are third-party APIs. So third-party APIs are not built into your browser. To use these APIs, you will have to download the code from the web. For example, YouTube API, Twitter API, Facebook API. So what does YouTube API do? It allows you to display videos on a website. What does Twitter API do? It allows you to display tweets on a website. And what does a Facebook API do? It allows you to display Facebook info on a website. So now let us understand more about HTML geolocation API. So HTML geolocation API is used to get the user's current location. So first, how does it help us? It helps us to locate the user's position. But how? So the geolocation API is used to access the user's current location. Since this can compromise privacy, so the location is not available unless the user approves it. You need to note one thing here. The geolocation API is only available on secure contexts such as HTTPs. And there is a tip for this API that this geolocation API is most accurate for devices with GPS like smartphones or smartwatches. And then let us see how to use HTML geolocation API. So the geolocation API is accessed via a call to navigator.geolocation. This will cause the browser to ask the user for permission to access their location data. And if the user accepts, the browser will search for the best available functionality on the device to access this information. For example, GPS. So there is a method like get current position method. Get current position method is used to return the user's current location. Then what are the error handling and rejections over here? The second parameter of the get position method is used to handle errors, and it specifies a function to run if it fails to get the user location. And geolocation is also very helpful for location specific information like number 1, up to date local information, number 2, showing points of interest near the user, number 3, turn by turn navigation, that is GPS. So what does this get current position method do? It returns an object on success. So the latitude, longitude and accuracy properties are always returned. So there are some properties which are returned in this get current position. Let me give you the properties. So coords dot latitude. What does it do? It returns the latitude as a decimal number, and this is always returned. Then there is another property coords dot longitude. So the longitude, this returns a longitude as a decimal number, and this is also always returned. Then you have coords dot accuracy. So here it returns the accuracy of the position. This is also always returned. This is always returned. This is also always returned. And this is also always returned. Next is coords dot altitude. So this returns the altitude in meters above the mean sea level. And this is returned if available. Then you have coords dot altitude accuracy. So this returns the altitude accuracy of position. And this is also returned if available. Then you have coords dot heading. So it returns the heading as degrees clockwise from north. And this is also returned if available. Then the last one is timestamp. Timestamp returns the date or time of a response. This is also returned if available. There are some other interesting methods also over here. That is watch position and then clear watch. These are the two methods, most interesting methods. So what does this watch position do? It returns the current location of the user and continues to return updated location as the user moves, like the GPS in a car. And then you have clear watch. It stops the watch position method. This clear watch stops the above method, that is watch position method. This was all about geolocation API. Now let us see what is HTML drag and drop API. So now let's move on to HTML drag and drop API. So the HTML drag and drop API enables an element to be dragged and dropped. Okay, like suppose you have some image over here. You can simply drag and drop in the second rectangle. Okay, so drag and drop is a very common feature. It is when you grab an object and drag it to a different location. So how to make an element draggable? So to make an element draggable, you have to set the draggable attribute to true. So you can do it by using this code img id equals img1 draggable equals true. So now let us see what to drag. So on drag start and set data, these are the two methods which helps us to drag an image. So then we need to specify what should happen when the element is dragged. So on drag start, that is an attribute. On drag start, it is an attribute of the img element, calls a function that specifies what data to be dragged. And then you have another method, that is data transfer dot set data. This method sets the data type and the value of the dragged data. So in this case, the data type is text and the value is the ID of the draggable element. Now let us understand where to drag, where to drop. We have seen where to drag, and now we will see where to drop. So you have an attribute on drag over of the div element, calls a function that specifies where the dragged data can be dropped. So by default, data or elements cannot be dropped in other elements. So to allow a drop, we must prevent the default handling of the element. And this is done by calling the prevent default method. Now let us see what is HTML Web Storage API. So what is HTML web storage? So with web storage, applications can store data locally within the user's browser. So before HTML5, application data had to be stored in cookies included in every server request. Now web storage is more secure and large amounts of data can be stored locally without affecting website performance. So unlike cookies, the storage limit is far larger, at least 5 MB, and information is never transferred to the server. So web storage is per origin, that is per domain and protocol. So all pages from one origin can store and access the same data. So there are a few web storage API objects. There are two objects. One is window.local storage. Then the next is window.session storage. So window.local storage stores data with no expiration date. That is, data is not lost when the browser tab is closed. And then window.session storage. It stores data for one session. That is, data is lost when the browser tab is closed. Then you have another object, that is local storage object. So what does this object do? Local storage object stores the data with no expiration date, and the data will not be lost when the browser is closed, and it will be available the next day, week or year. So this is about HTML Web Storage API. Now let us see what is HTML Web Workers API. So what do you mean by a web worker? A web worker is an external JavaScript file that runs in the background without affecting the performance of the page. So what is a web worker? See, when executing scripts in an HTML page, the page becomes unresponsive until the script is finished. So a web worker is an external JavaScript file that runs in the background independently of other scripts without affecting the performance of the page. So you can continue to do whatever you want, like clicking, selecting things, etc., while the web worker runs in the background. And web workers are useful for heavy code that cannot be run on the main thread without causing long tasks that make the page unresponsive. Now the next one is HTML server sent events. So it enables pushing messages or updates from a server to the web page via HTTP connection. So a server sent event is when a web page automatically gets messages or updates from a server. Normally, a web page has to request data from the server, but with server sent events, the updates are pushed automatically. Example, Facebook or Twitter updates, stock market updates, news feeds, sport results, etc. So now let me give you some HTML examples. So first is HTML basic. So what is contained in HTML basic? Like you have HTML document, HTML headings, HTML paragraphs, HTML links, HTML images, HTML buttons, and HTML list. And what are the HTML attributes? There are a few attributes which are commonly used. So one is title attribute, then href attribute, then width and height attribute, and then alt attribute, then attribute without quotes, and then coming to HTML headings, you have HTML headings, HTML horizontal rules, and HTML head.